An old tale retold by Madison Julius Cawein from the terrace here, where the hills indent, you can see the uttermost battlement of the castle there, the Cliffords' home, where the seasons go and the seasons come and never a footstep else doth fall save the prowling foxes. The ancient hall echoes no voice save the owlet's call. Its turret chambers are homes for the bat, and its courts are tangled and wild to see. And where in the cellar was once the rat, the viper and toad move stealthily. Long years have passed since the place was burned, and he sailed to the wars in France and earned the name that he bears of the bold and true on his tomb. Long years since my lord, Sir Hugh, lived, and I was his favorite page, and the thing then happened, and he of an age when a man will love and be loved again, or he to the wars or a monastery, or toil till he conquer his heart's sore pain, or drink and forget it and finally bury. I was his page, and often we fared through the Clare demesnes in autumn, hawking. If the baron had known how they would have glared, 'neath their bushy brows, those eyes of mocking. That last of the strongbows, Richard, I mean, and growling some 6 of his henchmen leaned to mount and after this Clifford and hang with his crop-eared page to the nearest oak, how he would have cursed us while he spoke. For Clare and Clifford had ever a fang in the other's side. And I hear the clang of his rage in the hall when the hawker told, if he told, how we met on the autumn wold his daughter, sweet Clara of Clare, the day her hooded tiercel its brails did burst, and trailing its jesses, came flying our way, and untrained haggard the falconer cursed while he tried to secure, as the eyes flew slant, low and heavily over us, Hugh, who saw it coming, and had just then cast his peregrine hawk at a heron quarry, in his saddle rising, so, as it passed, by the jesses caught, and to her did carry, where she stood near the wood. Her face flushed rose with the glad of the meeting. No two foes her eyes and my lord's, I swear, who saw 'twas love from the start, and I heard him speak some words, then he knelt, and the sombre shaw, with the rust of the autumn waste and bleak, grew spring with her smile, as the hawk she took on her lily wrist, where it pruned and shook its ragged wings. Then I saw him seize the hand, that she reached to him, long and white, as she smilingly bade him rise from his knees. When he kissed its fingers, her eyes grew bright, but her cheeks grew pallid when, lashing through the woodland there, with a face aflare with the sting of the wind, and his gypsy hair flying, the falconer came, and 2 or 3 of the people of Castle Clare. And the leaves of the autumn made a frame for the picture there in the morning's flame. What was said in that moment, I do not know, that moment of meeting, between those lovers. But whatever it was, tea was whispered low, and soft as a leaf that swings and hovers, a twinkling gold, when the leaves are yellow. And her face with the joy was still aglow, when down through the wood that burly fellow came with his frown, and made a pause in the pulse of their words. My lord, Sir Hugh, stood with the soil on his knee. No cause had he, but his hanger he partly drew, then clapped it sharp in its sheath again, and bowed to my lady, and strode away, and mounting his horse with a swinging rein rode with a song in his heart all day. He loved and was loved, I knew, for, look, all other sports for the chase he forsook, and strange that he never went to hawk, or hunt, but Clara would meet him there in the strongbow forest. I know the rock, with its fern-filled moss, by the bramble lair, where oft and again he met, by chance, shall I say? The daughter of Clare, as fair of face as a queen in an old romance, who waits with her sweet face pale, her hair night deep, and eyes dove grey with dreams, by the fountain side where the statue gleams and the moonbeam lolls in the lily white, for the knightly lover who comes at night. Hi-oh! They ceased, those meetings, I wot, betrayed to the baron by some of his crew of menials who followed and saw and knew. For she loved too well to have once forgot the time and the place of their trysting true. Why and when? Would ask Sir Hugh in the laboured letters he used to lock, the lover's post, in a coin of that rock. She used to answer, but now did not. But nearing Yule, love got them again a twilight tryst, through frowardness sure. They met, and that day was grey, with rain or snow, and the wind did ever endure a long bleak moaning thorough the wood, that chapped eye, the cheek and smarted the blood, and a brook in the forest went throb and throb, and over it all was the wild beast sob of the rushing boughs like a thing pursued. And then it was that he learned how God's blood, how it makes my old limbs quiver to think what a miserable tyrant he, the Baron Richard, aye and ever to his daughter was, forsooth, must wed with an Eastern earl, a Lovel, to whom, would God owe his mercy, had struck him dead. Clara of Clare, when only a child, with a face like a flower that blooms in the wild of the hills, and a soul like its soft perfume, was given to seal, or strengthen, some ties of power and wealth, say bartered, then, like the merest chattel. With tearful eyes and trembling lips she spoke, and when her lover, the Clifford, had learned and heard, he'd have had her flee with him then, as death. In spite of them all, let her speak the word, they would fly together, the Baron's men might follow, and if, and he touched his sword, it should answer. But she, while she seemed to stay, with a hand on her bosom, her heart's quick breath, replied to his heat, they would take and slay thee who art life of me. No, not thus shall we fly. There's another way for us, a way that is sure, an only way, I have thought it out this many a day. The words that she spoke, how well I remember, as well as the mood o' that day of December, that bullied and blustered and seemed in league, like a spiteful shrew, with the wind and snow, to drown the words of their sweet intrigue, with the boom of the boughs tossed to and fro. Her last words these, by curfew shore, on Christmas Eve, at the postern door, and we were there, with a led horse too, armed for a journey I hardly knew whither, but why, you well can guess. For often he whispered a certain name, the talisman of his happiness, that warmed his blood like a Yule log's flame. While we waited there, till its owner came, we saw how the castle's baronial girth, like a giant's, loosed for revelling more, shone, and we heard the wassail and mirth where the mistletoe hung in the hearth's red roar, and the holly brightened the weaponed wall of ancient oak in the banqueting hall. And the spits, I trow, by the scullions turned o'er the snoring logs, rich steamed and burned, while the whole wild boar and the deer were roasted, and the half of an ox and the roebuck haunches, while tons of ale, that the cellars boasted, and casks of sack, were broached for paunches of vassals who revelled in stable and hall. The song of the minstrel, the yeoman's quarrel o'er the dice and the drink, and the huntsman's ball in the baying kennels, its hounds a snarl o'er the bones of the banquet, now loud, now low, we could hear where we crouched in the drifting snow. Was she long? Did she come? By the postern we like shadows waited. My lord, Sir Hugh, spoke, pointing a tower, that casement, see? When a stealthy light in its slit burns blue and signals thrice slowly, thus, is she. And close to his breast his gaberdine drew, for the wind it whipped and the snow beat through. Did she come? We had waited an hour or twain, when the taper flashed in the central pane, and flourished 3 times and vanished so. And under the arch of the postern's portal, holding the horses, we stood in the snow, stiff with the cold. Ah, me, immortal minutes we waited, breath bated, and listened shivering there in the hiss of the gale. The parapets whistled, the angles glistened, and the night around seemed one black wail of death, whose ominous presence over the stormy battlements seemed to hover. Said my lord, Sir Hugh, to himself he spoke, she feels for the spring in the sliding panel, 'neath the arras, hid in the carven oak. It opens. The stair, like a well's dark channel, yawns, and the draught makes her taper slope. Wrapped deep in her mantle she stoops, now puts one foot on the stair, now a listening pause as nearer and nearer the mad search draws of the thwarted castle. No smallest hope that they find her now that the panel shuts. If the wind, that howls like a tortured thing, would throttle itself with itself, then I might hear how her hurrying footsteps ring down the hollow, there. As her fingers try the postern's bolts that the rust makes cling. But ever some whim of the storm that shook a clanging ring or a creaking hook in buttress or wall. And we waited, numb with the cold, till dawn, but she did not come. I must tell you why and have done. Is said, on the brink of the marriage she fled the sight of the guests and the bridegroom there. She fled with a mischievous laugh, all hide, seek, and be sure that you find. So led a long search after her, but defied all search for, 10 long years. Well, the laughter of Yule was turned to tears for them and for us. We saw the glare of torches that hurried from chamber to stair, and we heard the castle re-echo her name, but neither to them nor to us she came. And that was the last of Clara of Clare. That winter it was, a month thereafter, that the home of the Cliffords, roof and rafter, burned. I could swear, was the Strongbow's doing, were I sure that he knew of the Cliffords wooing his daughter, and so, by the rude and cross, had burned Hugh's home to avenge his loss. So over the channel to France with his king, the Black Prince, sailed to the wars, to deaden the ache of the mystery, Hugh that spring, and fell at Poitiers, for his loss made leaden his heart, and his life was a weary sadness, so he flung it away in a moment's madness. And the Baron died, and the bridegroom? Well, unlucky was he in truth. To tell of him there is nothing. The Baron died, the last of the Strongbows he, Gramercy. And the Clare estate with its wealth and pride devolved to the Bloats, Walter and Percy. And years went by, and it happened that they ransacked the old castle, and so, one day, in a lonesome tower uprummaged a chest, from Flanders, of ebon, and wildly carved all over with things, a sinister crest, and evil faces, distorted and starved, fast locked with a spring, which they forced and, lo! When they opened it, Death, like a lady dressed, grinned up at their terror. But no, not so. A skeleton, jeweled and laced, and wreathed with flowers of dust, and a minever around it clasped, that the ruin sheathed of a once rich raiment of silk and fur. I'd have given my life to hear him tell, the courtly Clifford, how this befell. He'd have known how it was. For, you see, in groping for the secret spring of that panel, hoping and fearing as nearer and nearer drew the search of retainers, why, out she blew the telltale taper, and, seeing this chest, would hide her a minute in it, mayhap, till the hurry had passed. But the death-lock, pressed by the lid's great weight, closed fast with a snap, ere her heart was aware of the fiendish trap.